The gospel for today may be found on page 1180 in your Bible, page 1180. It's from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 1, beginning with verse 21, page 1180. The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. The disciples went to Capernaum, and when the Sabbath came, Jesus entered a synagogue and taught. They were astounded at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority, and not as the scribes. Just then there was in their synagogue a man with an unclean spirit, and he cried out, "What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." Jesus rebuked him, saying, "Be silent, come out of him." And the unclean spirit, throwing him into convulsions and crying with a loud voice, came out of him. They were all amazed, and they kept on asking one another, "What is this? A new teaching with authority. He commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him." At once his fame began to spread throughout the surrounding region of Galilee. The Gospel of the Lord. This year we switch over to the Gospel of Mark, and Mark is very succinct. We're in chapter 1, and already he has been baptized in the Jordan by John the Baptist. He has gone out to be tempted in the desert. He's called his first disciples, and today we have this story, and still we're just at verse 28 of the first chapter of Mark. Now this story happens in Capernaum, a city in the northern part of Israel on the Sea of Galilee, a fishing town. It's where Jesus made his home when he started his public life. And he goes to the synagogue. And while he's there, he kind of takes over the place. He reads the scriptures, he preaches, he talks. And then there's this guy with an unclean spirit who cries out in a loud voice. And Jesus drives out the evil spirit. Jesus is the exorcist. Did you see the movie? How many of you saw that movie? I saw it, okay. It's weird, it's gross, it's bad. I only saw the first one. I think there were 4 or 5 others after it. And I'm not sure anything like that ever really happens. I don't think what Jesus did in the synagogue was like that. But anyhow, Jesus drove out the unclean spirit. You know what happens if you have an exorcist drive out an unclean spirit in you and you forget to pay the bill? You are repossessed. I know, it's carny, it's bad. I just want to see if you're awake. Okay. I think when Mark was putting this gospel together, I think he put this as the first miracle Jesus worked, publicly at least, for a reason. And here's the reason. It was in the synagogue, and the synagogue represents the religious authority of the day and the civil authority, because it was all one. And there was a synagogue in every town, and larger towns had 2 or 3 synagogues, and it's where they read the scriptures and heard the sermon and prayed some prayers. For us, it would be like the liturgy of the word, the first part of the Mass. The temple, there was just one of them. It was in Jerusalem, and that's where sacrifice was offered, as well as scriptures and prayers were read and so on. Together, they represented the authority of the Jews, the religious authority and the civil authority. Now, we know that the Romans were the ultimate authority. They had conquered the land, but they made a deal. They said to the Jews, look, we want to live in peace. We'll let you keep your religion. We'll let you worship Yahweh instead of worshiping the emperor as we do. We'll let you run the country, but you have to do two things. One, no revolutions. Don't try to rise up against us. And two, pay taxes. And your taxes will be substantial. But you, high priests and leaders of the synagogues and temple, you can take a cut, not a cut of our taxes, but you can build on some for yourselves, and that's your business. And they did. We know that the taxes of the poor people, the peasants, the farmers, was like 80% plus. And with the 20% they had left, or the 15% they had left, they had to feed their family, buy things they need, buy their seed, their supplies, all the rest, and they were living hand to mouth. Many of them starving, not knowing where the next meal came from, because the religious authorities, the civil authorities were overcome with greed. They wanted more and more, and they had power to make it happen. Greed and power often go together. That was the evil spirit that lived in them. Now, I'm not knocking the Jews of those days, because first of all, things are totally different for the Jews today. And secondly, this is with us forever. In every culture, in every age, we have the same problem of people wanting more and more and more and having the power to make sure they get it. I just read a little bit of the Oxfam report. It just came out this last week, I think, and it tracks money and who has the power and the riches in the world. They found that 42 people own as much wealth as the bottom half of the world, as much wealth as 3.7 billion people. 42 people have that much. They found that there is a new billionaire with a B, a new billionaire created every 2 days in the last 12 months. Any billionaires here? There's a new one every 2 months. You never know. Okay? And they say this is unacceptable and unsustainable. I would say it's sinful, because people can accumulate some wealth, but not so much wealth that the poor suffer and that we're so out of balance. And they say unsustainable, which means, I think, that there may be a revolution someday if this continues. It's just getting worse and worse and worse. Rich get richer, poor get poorer. Now, and the richest guy in the world gained $6 billion in the first 10 days of 2017. $6 billion in 10 days. Now, there are some people who are very wealthy who do good things with their money. Bill Gates and Warren Buffett have foundations that are giving lots of money to the poor. So that's great. If you have a lot of money, the idea is give a lot of it away. We have to share. But I think what Jesus is saying is, look, I'm driving out this devil, this evil spirit from your synagogue, from your religious institutions, from your civil institutions, from those who have authority and power over you and are filled with greed. I'm driving out that unclean spirit because I want there to be justice in this world so the poor do not have to suffer at your hands. I think what Jesus is saying to us today is we need to work for justice. We need to make sure that we share what we have, that we work to change the systems in our world, because many of these systems we just get used to. We take them for granted. We just say, well, that's the way it is. It's built in. Jesus is saying, no, you can do something. Let us just take a few moments to think about what we can do to bring justice to this world so that the poor are raised up as Jesus wants.